All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is the first 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast of 2025. We made it. Uh, Thank you. Thank you for listening, and I'm very glad you're all still here. I don't know exactly how many of you are still here, but I assume most of you. Anytime you take a few weeks off from a weekly product like I have, you always wonder. You always wind up wondering. So I'll know more next week, and I might address that a little bit more in detail, but the calendar is flipped. We are now in 2025, and I'm very excited to get things going with you guys. So thank you all very, very much for being here. You know the drill. Any way you can interact with the product is appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, etc., etc., etc. On the agenda this evening, we have the first UFC event of the year, and it is a dog. It's bad. The three after are pretty solid, but this is bad. It's just bad. But we'll get to that. Also, a few news pieces. Nothing too major. I don't know how to. I may have mentioned a little bit last year that the GFL was announced. Or I may have skipped it. It may have come out during the week when one of the weeks I was off. But I'll talk a little bit about that because boy, do I have thoughts. Boy, do I have thoughts. Anyway, that's what we've got. So thank y'all. Again, thank you very, very much for being here. All right, let's jump into this, shall we? UFC on ESPN Plus 107. And there's just nothing here, guys. Nothing has changed since I last looked at this card, really. One fight got changed. Doesn't matter that much. Your main event, Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Hebos. Rematch, actually. Who won their first one? I feel like Dern did. No, that was actually the first loss of Dern's career. Amanda Hebos got that one back in 2019. Okay. Dern 2-2 in her last four. Beat Angela Hill and Lupe Godinez, but between those had losses to Jessica Andrade and Amanda Lemos. They're still trying real hard to force Mackenzie Dern to be like good and in the top of the division. She's back down at straw. She's never been at strawweight for a bit because now she's been a little bit between flyweight and strawweight on occasion. Yeah, she's been strawweight for a while. Okay. The Godinez fight at a bare minimum. Hill would have been Andrade fight at 295. That was strawweight too. Okay, so yeah, she's been here for a bit. Finally got the weight issue figured out, and went good for her. Hebos, by contrast, another person they kind of just really wish was better. Hebos has been trading wins and losses since 21. Jeez. So 21, she starting in 21 January of 21 loses to Marina Rodriguez, beats Virna Jandiroba, loses to Caitlin Chikagian, beats Viviane Araújo, loses to Macy Barber, beats Luana Pinheiro, loses to Rose Namajunas, and some of this was bouncing between flyweight and strawweight. A lot of that was at flyweight, actually. Um, Her last strawweight fight was the Pinheiro one, and she went back to flyweight and lost to Rose over 5 rounds in kind of a nothing fight, if we're being honest. So now she's back at strawweight. The odds are with Hebos. I don't see a whole lot of reason to go against that, so I'll go with Amanda Hebos here, but I don't know. This division is just in a rough spot, and these two have just been around forever, and they've been kind of in the same spot for the last like 2.5, 3 years. And I'm kind of sick of the merry-go-round of these two. Co-main event, we have Santiago Ponzinibbio and Carlston Harris. This isn't the worst fight in the world. It's not the best fight on this card. We'll get to that in a minute or two. But this is not terrible. So Ponzinibbio 1-4 in his last five. Somewhat mitigated by three of those being split decisions. Jeff Neal, I thought Neal won that one. He lost to Michel Pereira. I think I agreed with Pereira on that one. Kevin Holland knocked him out. And then the Muslim Salikov. The Salikov and Neal fights, I think I scored all of those against Ponzinibbio, but those two in particular I recall being, hey, congratulations, we had two rounds that were moderately clear, one super close one, flip a coin. So anyway, he's fighting Carlston Harris, who is had a bit of a thing going at welterweight for a while. I was actually decently high on him. Won his first two UFC fights, then lost to Shavkat Rakhmonov, and well, okay, not gonna hold that one against you. Won his next two, Jared Gooden, Jeremiah Wells. Then he got knocked out by Chaos Williams, and that's a little bit troubling. These two guys are both older. Harris is 37, Ponzinibbio's 38. Harris doesn't quite have the same mileage on him that Ponzinibbio does, so there's that. Where are the odds on this one, out of curiosity? Super close. Yeah, that's fair. How do we feel? Most places they have Ponzinibbio, I think, a slight favorite. Those are coming. Those lines are getting. This is probably going to be a pick 'em by the time it's all said and done, which I understand. Ponzinibbio has shown flashes of still being able to, still being pretty good. He's just really not been able to consistently work. And I don't think he hits as hard as Williams, who, for all of his many flaws as a fighter, actually does have a pretty good punch. I'm going to go with Harris. That's super close in my mind, but that's where I'm leaning right now. Middleweight next, Cesar Almeida and Abdul Razak Al Hassan. So Almeida, 2-1 in the UFC. His only loss, a split decision to Roman Kopylov, which was, I agreed the Kopylov won, but that was pretty close. He's a decorated kickboxer. Beat Ihor Potieria last time out. And Abdul Razak Al Hassan is 39, coming off of a no contest. He was winning that fight, but then, he fouled Cody Brundage, and Brundage didn't want to continue. So, he's had a rough run lately. He's got 2 wins since 2020. I mean, kind of says it all there, doesn't it? I'll go with Almeida. The best fight on the card, in my estimation, certainly the one I'm most looking forward to, middleweight next, Chris Curtis and Roman Kopylov. This is a good fight. Curtis, 37, coming off the split decision loss to Brendan Allen over 5 rounds. I kind of thought he won that one. But, how it kind of goes sometimes. Kopylov is coming off of the loss. No, he rebounded after the loss to Anthony Hernandez with the win over Cesar Almeida. These two are going to strike it out for the most part, and I am kind of looking forward to it. This is a really good. This is well matched. Curtis, more of a puncher than anything else, but he's got pretty good defense. Good body puncher. Kopylov's kicks are going to be a bit of a problem for him. But the more he can get this into the pocket, the more it might shift a little bit towards Curtis. And Curtis is kind of just good everywhere. I'm still inclined towards Kopylov. He's not going to. He beat Almeida largely by out wrestling him because Almeida was the better striker, but that is kind of Kopylov's way things go. He's normally a striker, and I'm willing to I'm willing to go with Kopylov here. But this is actually the fight I'm most looking forward to personally, so take that for what that's worth. Featherweights, Christian Rodriguez and Austin Bashi. Um, I don't know how to pronounce that gentleman's name. Where is he from? United States. Okay. He's undefeated. Bosch. I'm going to go with Bashi and until I hear proper pronunciation. He's 13 and 0. Certainly nothing to sneeze at. Coming off a win on the Contender Series to get into the UFC. Um, okay, again, that's a little, that's moderately promising. All right. And Rodriguez, he's been in the UFC a little bit. 11 and 2, 4 and 2 in the UFC. Lost to Jonathan Pierce, won 4 in a row. Missed weight a couple of times though. Lost to Julian Erosa his last time out. They might be trying to get, the guy off the Contender Series a little bit of a win here. I don't think this is an unfair matchup, but Rodriguez, we've also kind of, I think, seen what's up with him. So let me read. I'll read the tea leaves a little bit there as far as what the matchmaking is trying to accomplish and go with Bashi. Welterweights, Punahele Soriano and Uroš Medic. Let's see here. Soriano, way up and down. Coming off a win over Miguel Baeza when he dropped to welterweight for the first time. Bit of a surprising win there. I think I picked him, but he had a really awkward run at middleweight. His last 5 at middleweight, he went 1 and 4. Some of those losses are understandable. Brendan Allen's very good. Roman Kopylov's pretty good. But, Nick Maximov, Dustin Stoltzfus getting tapped out. I mean, Stoltzfus is not a bad fighter, but it's still not the best indicator. So his welterweight campaign looks to continue here. He and Baez had a good fight, the more I remember that. Medic, not too dissimilar. Returned to welterweight in 23. Beat Matthew Semmelsberger, coming off a win over Tim Means. He also lost to Miktabek Orlbay in there. Well, Medic came up from lightweight. Okay. Yeah, not the worst fight. I'm not getting, too excited about it. Soriano's game hits hard. Medic has done pretty decent work the last little bit, though. I'm gonna go with Medic. We'll lean that way and see how that goes. On the prelims, we have Jose Johnson and Felipe Bunez. I think that's how that was pronounced. I can't remember specifically. Johnson 16 and 9. Coming off of a loss. He's 1 and 2 in the UFC. Okay, his losses are to Damon Blackshear and Asu Almabayev, and Almabayev's pretty good. And Blackshear's maybe not a world beater, but he's nobody to sneeze at. And he has a win over Chad and Helliger in there as well. Bunez 13 and 7. Lost his UFC debut to Joshua Van. It's a tough draw for your debut. What's he lost to that I might know? Lost to Jussier Formiga. Not a bad flyweight. I mean, Van's just a tough draw for anybody. I'm gonna lean towards him. Johnson's slightly more proven in the UFC, a little bit more of a known commodity. You know what? No. Johnson's the favorite for the record. My first underdog pick of the year. I'll go with Bunez. Just kind of because I'm curious there. Middleweights next, Marco Tullio and Ihor Potieria. And I am not really at the spot where I pick Potieria to win anything. Tullio, let's have a quick look at him. 12-1, 8-fight winning streak, coming into his UFC debut. He has 2 Contender Series wins. Good grief. Okay. That's enough for me to go with him. I don't need a whole lot there. I don't think Potieria is any good. So Tullio it is. Alrighty. Lightweight, Thiago Moises and Trey Ogden. Pretty sure this is Moises. Moises has been a little bit up and down. Look, his losses in the UFC are as follows. Beneil Dariush in his debut. Demiris Magulov, Islam Makhachev, Joel Alvarez, Benoit Saint-Denis, and Ludovic Klein. Now, he has a couple of good wins in there as well. Michael Johnson, Bobby Green. Stopped somebody with leg kicks last year. I think we know where his ceiling is, but he's also fought really good guys. I mean, you know, between Makhachev and Alvarez alone, those two back-to-back, that is a rough 2-fight stretch. Ogden, let me double-check, because Ogden's been around for a little bit, too. He is 18-6, 2-fight winning streak, 3-2 with 1 no contest during his time in the UFC. 2-fight winning streak over Holobo and Loic Radzhabov. Radzhabov win was a bit of an upset. He gets his job done mostly with wrestling. I don't think that's the right way to go about fighting Thiago Moises. So I'm going to go with Moises. Alrighty. Women's flyweight, Ernesta Carrascate and Nicole Cagliari. So Carrascate lost her UFC debut. She's 5-1-1. But she kept going. She came on strong in that third round when Dione Barbosa faded. So there's that. Okay. She's been out for a little bit. Yeah, May of last year. Cagliari, which is how I'm going to pronounce that until I hear otherwise. Let's see. 4-fight winning streak. This is her UFC debut. That does complicate things. You know, I was decently impressed with Carrascate. Let me go with her. Okay, this woman's name is very difficult to spell. K-R-E-C-K-A-I-T-E. K-R-E-C... Yeah. K-A-I-T-E. Alright. Not terribly sold on that one, but I've seen her more than I've seen Cagliari, so... Light heavyweight, because, of course, Magomed Gaziasulov and Bruno Lopez. This is probably not going to be good. So, Gaziasulov, one of the Bahrainian fighters, 9-0. Had a good successful UFC debut against Brendan Hiberia, where he got a majority decision. Gaziasulov is not in a bad spot overall. Lopez, 13-1. 2-fight winning streak. Went 1-1 on the Contender Series. This is his UFC debut. He has a loss to Brendan Hiberio on the Contender Series. Most recently, he beat Mikel Stasiani? Aniani? I need to see. He's Georgian. I don't know how that would be properly pronounced. So Lopez is, decent prospect. I'm probably just going to go with the odds on this one. What do we got here? Odds are with Gaziasulov. I don't think that's horribly unfair. So, G-A-D-Z-H-I-Y. G-A-D-Z-H-I-Y-A-S-U. Gaziasulov. Okay. Let's see. Women's strawweights. Fatima Klein and Victoria Dudakova. I think I'm going with Dudakova here. Klein is 6-1. She had a pretty solid UFC debut, even in a loss, where you just kind of went like, man, that poor woman really doesn't want to be at this weight class. She actually wants to be one lower. And she fought Jasmine Jasdavicius, but again, turned in a pretty decent overall account of herself despite the loss. And Dudakova is what, 1-1 in the UFC or 2-1? 2-1. Coming off a split decision loss to Sam Hughes. I seem to recall scoring that for her, but don't quote me on that. Yeah, that's not the worst. This is honestly not the worst fight in the world you could make for these two. Klein is a big favorite. We're talking like -800 to -1,000. That doesn't strike me as terribly representative here. I will be picking her though. So, yeah, go with Klein. When the odds are that heavy, I need a pretty good reason, even if it's just internal, to go against everybody else, and I don't have it right now for that fight. We have two fights that we're not quite sure on the bout order yet, so have a quick look for one of these. So we were supposed to get Andreas Gustafsson and Preston Parsons. Gustafsson fell out. Instead, we have Preston Parkins and Jacob Smith. I don't have much of a problem picking Parsons under these circumstances. I was not going to pick him to beat Gustafsson. But he is a... Wow, he's an underdog against Smith. Hang on. Let me have a quick look at this one. Look, I get that Parsons has not exactly set the world on fire in the UFC. He's 11-5, 2-3 in the promotion. He's been trading wins and losses. But his losses are to Daniel Rodriguez, Trevin Giles, that was a split decision, and then Oban Elliott. So those are not bad guys that he's losing to. And he has wins over Evan Elder and Matthew Semmelsberger. I would not have picked him to beat Gustafsson, but I think he's getting done a little bit dirty here. A quick look at Smith. 9-0, certainly respectable. Has a win on the Contender Series. You know what? I will buck the odds just a little bit here, and I'll go with Parsons. Short notice thing might be very, very wrong, but I'll eat the loss if I am. And we were supposed to get Nurulio Aliv and Yanal Ashmuz. Ashmuz pulled out in steps Joe Selecki. So as far as that goes, Selecki 13-5, 5-3 in the UFC. 2-fight losing streak. He got slammed. Oh yeah, he got slammed by Drakkar Klose and then lost to Grant Dawson in June of last year. Aliev, 9-0. One of those Tajik guys that's actually pretty good. Beat Rafael Alves in his UFC debut. He's had fights fall out with Mateusz Rembeszki and Yanal Ashmuz. I feel okay going with Aliev here. I probably would have gone with Aliev over Ashmuz, but under these circumstances, yeah, no real problem going with him there. So that is where we stand on that. I will be keeping track of my predictions again, so we'll be tracking that. I hope you all don't mind me doing that. I enjoy the exercise. So that's what we've got. Saturday, MMAZona411mania.com. Go stop by, say hello. You know where I'll be, and I always appreciate any support y'all can give me in that respect. So thank you very much. Not a lot to preview there, I know. So we're not gonna go very long today. Look, it's not a very good card, I told you guys, so I don't have a whole lot to really dig into there. All right, so let's move on to a bit of the news, shall we? So one of these is short, one of them might take a little bit longer. All right, so on the shorter end of things, Jon Jones has said he wants $30 million for a fight with Tom Aspinall. I think I saw someone on the old X machine say it about the right way, that is the kind of perfectly reasonable request that will price him out of the UFC, of the UFC wanting to do it. Look, $30 million for Jon Jones to fight Tom Aspinall that's not an unfair request on his end. Jones has been after a big payday like that for a while. He's deserved a big payday like that for quite a while. And I know that Jon is not a lot of people's favorite person, and I'm not here to advocate for him on that level. But if you just look at what he's accomplished in the sport and the money he's drawn for the UFC relative to what he's been underpaid for basically his whole career. Certainly his whole career as champion, which is most of his career at this point. Because the UFC just doesn't pay fighters very well in that respect. Um, if that's what he's after for this fight, he's not asking for an objectively unreasonable amount of money for the fight, given the stakes of the fight, given the profile the fight has achieved at this point, and given what it will generate for the UFC. Now, the UFC is going to be very, 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 very reticent to pay him that because they don't want to pay anybody that much money because they want to keep their athlete compensation costs under 20%, preferably around 15%. So we'll have to wait and see on that one, but there seems to be some indication that they might try to they'll try to sucker like the Saudis or somebody to pay for part of it. I don't know. But Jon's put out a very specific number, so we'll see if the Aspinall fight does in fact happen. I've been a bit iffy on that one whether or not it actually occurs. So we'll see. But there's that. So if Jon gets 30 million, good for him. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of the man, as a human being, based on everything I know, which is admittedly not everything. But as a fighter, he is absolutely someone that I've watched his entire UFC career. I've covered the vast majority of it. I I would rather, fighters I really, really I think are good people get paid the 30 million instead of just Jon, but the UFC's not going to throw 30 million towards Alexandre Pantoja or Max Holloway or anybody else. Like, that's a good dude. They're just not really going to do that because they're not going to do that to anyone. They're probably not going to pay Jon 30 million, and if Jon actually sticks to that number, then the fight again, it's a little bit dubious, but that's been making the rounds recently, so figured I'd mention it, and we'll see how that plays out. We will keep you appraised here. It's kind of what we do. All right. So here's another thing that came out. The GFL made a big thing about its being announced. It is the Global Fights League. This is going to, allegedly, this will be launched in April. There will be a draft. There will be city-based teams. Guys, I remember the IFL, okay? I actually kind of liked the IFL, believe it or not, because it was a little bit different from the UFC and it was on a bit more consistently. It was easier for me to access, certainly at that period of time. And some pretty good fighters came through the IFL, believe it or not. But it failed, and that's not an accident. But anyway. So here's the thing. So there's going to be a draft. There's going to be weight classes. The weight classes are a little bit different. Let me go through this real briefly here. So there's 10 weight classes. They start at women's strawweight, which is 120 pounds for this. Women's flyweight is 130. Bantamweight is 140. And there's not going to be any men in those weight classes, it looks like. Then on the men's side, we have bantamweight at 145, featherweight at 155, lightweight at 165, welterweight at 180, middleweight at 200, light heavyweight at 225, and heavyweight at 265. Can I just be honest? I'm kind of sick of the upper limited heavyweight. The upper weight limited heavyweight. I don't know what good it's doing at this point. I know kind of why they imposed it because they were sick of like the really fat guys. But boxing doesn't have an upper bound limit for heavyweight. I kind of think we ought to get on board with that. Anyway, so those are the weight classes they'll be using. Curious about a couple of those, believe it or not. Seeing who will be at their 165-pound weight class, a little bit interested. Um, Middleweight being at 200 and welterweight there's no 190 class here, so we go from 180 to 200. There's still that 20-pound jump there. Seems odd to me. Light heavyweight at 225. Actually, I'm moderately interested in. There's some smaller heavyweights who couldn't make 205 for whom 225 might be doable. So anyway, there's that, and those are that I'm actually moderately interested in it because the weight classes in MMA, shaking those up a little bit or potentially moving them around, like that's not something I'm opposed to. But the fighters listed, most of these people are very old. I'm not gonna go completely through all of them because there's a long list, but I'm gonna list some of the names you might recognize if you don't mind me doing this. Let's see, Alan Belcher, BKFC champion. Alexei Oleinik, who's, old man in the hills there. Andrei Arlovsky, who was cut from the UFC recently and is old. Fabricio Verdum, who claimed he's having a lot of CTE issues in that letter he signed for the fighter lawsuit that he's part of. Makes you wonder which time he's lying about, then or now. Frank Mir, Junior Dos Santos, Greg Hardy, Robelis Despain, Tanner Bozier, Alexander Gustafsson coming out of retirement. That'll be sad. Alir Latifi, who's been sad for a long time anyway. Thiago Santos, who's, Gegard Mousasi, good grief. Hector Lombard. Luke Rockhold. Vanderlei Silva, God help us. Benson Henderson, all right. Jordan Mean, he's got to change his nickname, man. You're not Young Gun anymore, buddy. Francisco Trinaldo, I got a soft spot for old Master Randuba. Husamar Palhares, that's ugly. Tyron Woodley, Anthony Pettis. Jeremy Stevens, Kevin Lee. Will Brooks, there's a guy I haven't thought about in a minute. Marlon Moraes, oh, that's going to be sad. Andre Sukumtat, Jimmy Rivera. Some of these guys should have moved on. Like Rivera and Moraes are police officers, if memory serves. Like, just let's not do this, please. Henan Barao, good grief, that'll be sad. Tanya Evinger, Oven St. Preux, what the Paige Van Zant, doubly sad. Isn't she making enough money from OnlyFans? I don't know. I don't actually know the numbers related to that, so who knows? That might be bottoming out for her. Alex Oliveira, ugh. We need another dirty fighter. There's a bunch of people you've never heard of. So what we have here are like guys who were really awesome in like 2012. Guys like 10 to 13, 14, 15 years past their expiration date. Or we're getting people who have less than 10 fights who are looking to make their name in the UFC. Or a few of these other people just kind of washed out. Hannah Goldie washed out of the UFC. Jessica Penne. Yeah. So that's a thing. I don't know that there's any hope for this enterprise, and as I mentioned, what I'm mostly kind of curious about is some of the weight classes, because they're not the same, and messing with some of the weight classes in the UFC I don't necessarily consider a bad thing. But come on, man, Renan Barão, let's have a quick look at old Renan Barão, shall we? Barrao's last win was in 2016. Okay, he beat Felipe Nover. He left the UFC on a 5-fight losing streak. Retired. Came out of retirement 2 years ago, actually. Now, well, okay, it's a little over a year when you go by the month. In October of 23, came out of retirement and lost a split decision in Kuwait. Once again, in, 2013, 14, Burrell was, a big deal. Not so much now. Jeremy Stevens, I think they just have him for the meme potential. Yeah, Tyron Woodley. When was Tyron Woodley's last MMA fight? His last MMA fight was getting choked out by Vicente Luque in 2021. His exit from the UFC. Since then, the only thing he's done is lose to Jake Paul in boxing. I don't know what to do with that. Again, there were some really... Man, Vanderlei Silva. I was around for Vanderlei's run through Pride, man. I have a lot of affection for him. But he's on a 2-fight losing streak in Bellator to Chael Sonnen and Quentin Jackson, the last fight of which was in 2018, and he lost to Fat Rampage. And guys, that was September of 18. That's 6 years ago and change. What are we doing here? Playing the greatest hits from a decade ago. This is the frickin' like county fair rock and roll show of MMA. That's what we've got here. So, that's the thing. And I will do my job, and I will sort of keep you all updated on that as relevant stuff comes about. But I don't expect that goes anywhere. Same way I don't expect the PFL to actually go anywhere. The UFC controls the majority of elite fighters in the sport, and it's not close. And without that, you're not really able to do much. So here we are. And Don Davis is a terrible promoter. Good grief. Khabib Nurmagomedov kind of got Twitter going earlier this week when he said that, Irish MMA is just behind Dagestani MMA. Now, you can argue that point a little bit, believe it or not. This is sort of ahead of the Paul Hughes versus Usman Nurmagomedov. And nobody from the PFL has capitalized on the online discourse about this. Now, for whatever it's worth, I'm not up to date on all the training methodologies that are taking place in gyms across Ireland. At a bare minimum, Dagestan MMA fighters have been much more successful than Irish MMA fighters, I think, to this point. And that doesn't strike me as an unfair thing to say, but that's just me. So, but again, like, what did PFL do to try and capitalize on some of that? Not a darn thing. Ugh. Sad. It's just sad. Okay. That's all the stuff I had written down because we had kind of a quiet, not too long ago we had a year kickoff where I had to talk about Dana White hitting his wife in public. Had a kind of quieter New Year's this time around on the MMA front, so. I will, however, check the old social medias, and if nothing crazy is broken, we'll do plugs and get out of here, and we'll just have a very short show that kicked off this year. Minor thing. I don't really want to talk about it until there's something actually concrete worth talking about, but for what it's worth, there's some noise being made about Conor McGregor engaging in some kind of a boxing match with Logan Paul, not even Jake Paul. Financed by a really super wealthy family in India. Conor's in fact doing I'm getting like $250 million thing. That strikes me as impossible is the wrong word. Unlikely. I mean, what a waste of time that would be, but there's people with more money than sense all over the place. It's easy to find a mark. So when there's actually news on that front, we'll talk about it. But until such time as there's actually news, at the moment we have rumor, though. Michael Chandler having to waste 2 years of his career, the last 2 good years of his career in all probability, to then finally stop waiting, lose his next fight, and watch Conor McGregor fight for more money than any MMA fighter would make in 20 careers is certainly a thing. All right, but on that note, let's go on to plugs then, shall we? So, what do I got this week? I covered Wrestle Dynasty on Saturday, so that was fun. My 2024 year-end awards column will be up in the MMA Zone, probably up in the MMA Zone at least. So give that a read if you're so inclined. I appreciate it. Monday we will be reviewing Nosferatu, the Eggers film, over on Damn You Hollywood. Last week on Damn You Hollywood, myself, Mark Radulich, and Alexis Haina got together. We did our 10 best and 5 worst films of 2024, so you can find that over on the W2M network. Or just look for Damn You Hollywood on your podcast platform. You should be able to find us there. And give that a listen if any of that strikes you as something you would like to listen to. My ramblings and other things. WWE SmackDown on Friday. 3-hour SmackDown is not a thing I want, but it is a thing I'm stuck with. So, yeah. And the UFC event on Saturday. So, getting back into the swing of things after, the last week and change of the old new year and the first week of the old year and the first week of the new year are kind of like, I heard someone refer to them as like the Bermuda Triangle, like they don't really exist. But we're ready to get back into the swing of things a little bit, so that's what we got. All right. I will see you all next week. We will review UFC on ESPN Plus 107 and preview UFC 311, which is actually a pretty solid little pay-per-view. So that's it. Thank you all very much. Looking forward to another year with you all doing the darn thing. All right. So hope you all had a good holiday break. Hope you all had a Merry Christmas. Hope you all are looking forward with optimism, or at least less pessimism, if you can't muster genuine optimism. I spent a lot of time not being able to do that, so just less pessimism. We'll graduate upward on that. All right. Thank you again, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you. Stay safe out there, and until next time, continue to be well, be safe, and behave.